Think about the last time you felt truly fine. Not just busy or productive, but actually present. If you're like most people living in the modern world, that feeling is becoming a rare luxury. We often wait for a breakdown to happen. We expect a massive sign, a mental alarm bell, or a complete collapse to tell us we've pushed too far. But there is a fundamental truth about your brain that almost no one talks about. Your brain doesn't break all at once. It doesn't scream for help, and it doesn't send a warning notification to your phone. Instead, it does something far more dangerous. It adapts. This is the silent adaptation. Your brain is a masterpiece of survival. Its primary job isn't to make you happy or fulfilled, it's to keep you going. So, when you bombard it with endless notifications, back-to-back meetings, and the constant hum of digital noise, it doesn't shut down. It simply recalibrates. It starts treating high stress levels as the new room temperature. It begins to accept a state of perpetual distraction as the standard operating procedure. You don't wake up one day and suddenly become an anxious person or a procrastinator. It happens in the quiet spaces of your day. It's in that habit of checking your email before your eyes are even fully open. It's in the way you keep a podcast running while you shower because 30 seconds of silence feels itchy and uncomfortable. Every time you deny your brain a moment of stillness, you are training it to stay in a state of high alert. Over time, this adaptation creates a version of you that is living on autopilot. You feel tired, but you can't sleep. You feel busy, but you aren't actually finishing anything important. You find yourself scrolling through social media for an hour, not because you're enjoying it, but because your brain is so starved for a hit of easy dopamine that it's lost the ability to focus on anything that requires real effort. The most uncomfortable part is that we've started to mistake this survival mode for a personality trait. We say things like, "I'm just a procrastinator," or "I've always been a bit high-strung." We blame our character when the reality is far more biological. You aren't the problem. The environment you've built for your brain is. We live in a culture that incentivizes this sabotage. We praise the hustle. We romanticize the multitasker, and we act as if being reachable 24/7 is a badge of honor. But biologically speaking, we are asking a prehistoric organ to handle a futuristic amount of data, and it is quietly suffocating under the weight of it all. The shift begins when you stop waiting for the crash. You have to realize that the fatigue you're feeling isn't a sign that you need more coffee. It's a signal that your nervous system has been running a marathon for months without a single water break. When you understand that your brain is silently adapting to the chaos, you can finally start to intentionally adapt it back toward clarity. It starts with recognizing that normal isn't the same as healthy, and just because you can keep going doesn't mean you should. We live in a world that is terrified of the void. Think about it. The moment you step into an elevator, wait for a coffee, or sit at a red light, what is the very first thing you do? You reach for your phone. We have become experts at filling every microscopic crack in our day with noise. This isn't just about loud music or the bustle of traffic. It's the digital noise. The podcasts, the reels, the endless stream of opinions, and the background videos that play while we do chores. We treat silence as a void that needs to be filled, but in doing so, we are depriving our brains of the very thing they need to function. To understand why this matters, we have to look at the noise detox not as a luxury, but as a biological necessity. Your brain, specifically your prefrontal cortex, is the CEO of your life. It's responsible for complex planning, decision-making, and moderating social behavior. But this CEO is being constantly interrupted. Imagine trying to run a company while 10 people are screaming different statistics at you every 5 seconds. You might be able to hear them, but you certainly can't lead. When we live in constant stimulation, we are consuming information, but we aren't integrating it. There is a massive neurological difference between hearing something and knowing it. Integration happens in the quiet. It's in the silence that your brain takes the raw data you've gathered throughout the day and begins to weave it into the fabric of your long-term memory. It's where information is upgraded into wisdom. Without these pockets of stillness, you might read 30 books a year, but you'll find that 6 months later, you can't remember a single life-changing lesson from them. You've had the input, but your brain never had the quiet time required to file it away properly. Furthermore, constant noise keeps us in a state of cognitive overstimulation. Silence often feels itchy or uncomfortable because, for many of us, it's the only time we are left alone with our own thoughts. and our thoughts can be loud. We use background noise as a shield to protect us from our own anxiety, our own worries, and our own creative impulses that might feel overwhelming. But that itch is actually a sign of a brain that is desperate to decompress. When you start a noise detox, something fascinating happens. Initially, the silence feels heavy. You might feel a sudden surge of restlessness. But if you sit with it for just 5 or 10 minutes, the dust begins to settle. Your prefrontal cortex stops frantically reacting to external triggers and starts organizing your internal world. This is where clarity comes from. It's that aha moment that usually only hits you in the shower. Not because the water is magical, but because the shower is one of the few places where you aren't staring at a screen. Choosing silence isn't about being boring or unproductive. It's about creating a sanctuary for your mind. It's about realizing that if everything is an emergency for your attention, then nothing is truly important. By intentionally stepping back from the noise, you aren't missing out on the world. You are finally giving yourself the mental space to actually live in it. You are trading the shallow buzz of constant connection for the deep, resonant power of a clear and present mind. At this point, you might be realizing that the problem isn't a lack of motivation. It's that most of us are trying to build a better life while living in an environment that constantly pulls our attention in the opposite direction. And that's exactly why I created something to help. It's called 30 Days to a Better You. It's a simple challenge designed to help you build better habits, create more mental clarity, reduce stress, and become more intentional with your time, without adding another overwhelming system to your life. Each day gives you one small action, a short reflection prompt, and practical exercises that take just a few minutes to complete. Nothing extreme, nothing complicated, just small daily steps that compound into real change. So if you're tired of consuming self-improvement content and you're ready to actually apply it, you'll find the link in the description below. Now, there's another modern habit that's quietly draining your mental energy every single day. And most people mistake it for productivity. We have been sold a lie, and we've bought it because it makes us feel like superheroes. We've romanticized the image of the power multitasker. The person with 20 tabs open, 3 conversations going on Slack, and a phone glued to their ear, all while getting things done. We wear our ability to juggle a dozen tasks at once like a badge of honor. But if we peel back the curtain and look at the neurobiology of it all, we find that the multitasking myth is one of the most expensive delusions we entertain. It is, quite literally, a drain on your life force. Here is the cold, hard truth. Your brain cannot focus deeply on 2 things at the same time. It is physically impossible. When you think you are multitasking, what you are actually doing is context switching. You are forcing your brain to stop focusing on task A, pivot to task B, and then snap back to task A. It feels fast, it feels busy, and it gives you a tiny rush of adrenaline that tricks you into thinking you're being efficient. But every single time you switch that focus, your brain pays a switch cost. Imagine driving a car and slamming it from drive into reverse every 30 seconds while moving at 60 miles per hour. You might cover some ground, but you are absolutely shredding the transmission. In your brain, this transmission is your mental energy. Each switch requires a burst of metabolic fuel. This is why you can sit at a desk for 8 hours, never actually complete a single deep project, and yet finish the day feeling as if you've run a marathon. You aren't tired because of the work you did. You're tired because of the thousands of tiny, violent pivots your brain had to make. This constant switching is a form of dispersed focus. It prevents you from entering what psychologists call flow, that state where time disappears and you do your absolute best work. You can't reach the deep water if you're constantly jumping back to the shore every time a notification pings. Multitasking keeps you in the shallows. It ensures that your output remains average, your thinking remains surface level, and your stress levels remain high. So, how do we break the myth? We replace it with the power of monotasking, or working in intentional blocks. Imagine the relief of telling your brain, for the next 50 minutes, there is only one thing in the world that matters. This isn't just a productivity tip, it's an act of kindness toward your nervous system. When you work in a block, dedicating specific time for creativity, then a separate block for emails, then another for execution, you stop the bleeding of mental energy. You allow your brain to settle into a rhythm. You'll find that you actually finish tasks faster because you aren't spending the first 10 minutes of every re-switch trying to remember where you left off. It takes courage to monotask in a world that demands your attention be fractured. It feels slower at first because you aren't getting those cheap hits of adrenaline from jumping between apps. But at the end of the day, you'll notice a profound difference. You'll have a finished product you're proud of, and more importantly, you'll still have enough battery life left to enjoy your evening. Reclaiming your focus isn't about doing less. It's about doing what matters with the full weight of your intelligence, rather than a scattered version of it. We often talk about our minds as if they exist in a vacuum, as if our thoughts and focus are purely mental things that we can conjure out of thin air through sheer willpower. We treat our bodies like a vehicle that carries our head from meeting to meeting, and when we feel sluggish or distracted, we get frustrated. We tell ourselves we're being lazy or that we lack discipline, but we are overlooking a fundamental biological reality. Your brain is a physical organ. It is made of tissue, fueled by glucose, and cleaned by lymphatic fluids. It is the most energy-hungry part of your body, and it doesn't care about your deadlines if it doesn't have the high-quality fuel it needs to function. For too long, we've treated things like sleep, hydration, and movement as lifestyle choices or rewards we give ourselves after the work is done. We think, I'll sleep when this project is finished, or I'm too busy to stop for water. But in the world of neurobiology, these aren't optional luxuries. They are the baseline requirements for cognitive performance. When you deprive yourself of these, you aren't just powering through. You are effectively trying to run a high-performance engine on fumes and wondering why it's sputtering. Take sleep, for example. We've been conditioned to view the hustle as a sacrifice of sleep. But while you're unconscious, your brain is doing its most intense work. It is literally taking out the trash. The glymphatic system flushes out metabolic waste, toxins that build up during the day. When you cut that process short, those toxins remain. That brain fog you feel the next morning isn't a lack of motivation. It's a physical state of toxicity. You are asking a cluttered, unwashed brain to make high-level decisions. Then, there is the matter of dopamine management. Most of us start our day by refueling with the wrong kind of energy. We reach for our phones before we even get out of bed, flooding our systems with cheap, easy dopamine, likes, news, and notifications. We think we're waking up, but we're actually blowing out our reward system. If you give your brain a massive hit of free dopamine in the first 10 minutes of the day, it will spend the next 12 hours rejecting anything that requires effort. Why would your brain want to focus on a difficult report or a creative problem when it knows it can get a win just by scrolling? Proper fueling means choosing high-quality dopamine. It means finding that reward in movement, in a morning walk, in the feeling of being hydrated, or in the satisfaction of completing a small, tangible task. This is the slow-burn fuel that sustains focus rather than the flash-fire fuel of digital stimulation that leaves you burnt out by noon. We also have to stop negotiating with our bodies regarding movement. Our brains evolved to function while we were in motion, navigating environments and solving problems on the move. When we sit perfectly still in a chair for 8 hours, we are essentially telling our nervous system to power down. A 5-minute walk isn't a distraction from work. It is a biological reboot that flushes your brain with oxygen and resets your ability to concentrate. The shift happens when you stop seeing self-care as a chore and start seeing it as an investment in your greatest asset. You don't put cheap, watered-down gas in a Ferrari and expect it to win a race. If you want mental clarity, if you want that flow state that everyone talks about, you have to provide the physical conditions for it to exist. When you stop treating your biological needs as interruptions and start treating them as the foundation of your productivity, the struggle for focus begins to disappear. Your brain finally has the resources to do what it was designed to do: think, create, and thrive. We love the idea of the lightning bolt moment, the dramatic epiphany, or the sudden burst of willpower that transforms us into a completely different person overnight. We wait for a New Year's resolution or a life crisis to flip a switch in our minds. But neurobiology tells a different story. Your brain isn't changed by intensity. It is sculpted by repetition. Real, lasting transformation is a quiet, almost invisible process. This is the identity shift, and it is the final piece of the puzzle in reclaiming your mental life. To understand how this works, you have to look at how habits are actually formed. When you do something new, your brain has to work incredibly hard to build a neural pathway. It's like hacking a trail through a dense, overgrown forest. It's exhausting, and your brain, which is designed to conserve energy, will constantly try to steer you back to the paved highway of your old habits. This is why big changes usually fail. If you try to change everything at once, the forest is too thick, and you eventually give up and go back to the path of least resistance. The secret to a permanent identity shift is to make the new path so small and so easy that your brain doesn't even realize you're building it. This is the power of micro habits. When you decide to stop living in constant noise or to stop multitasking, you don't need to go on a week-long silent retreat or throw your phone in the ocean. That is intensity, and intensity doesn't last. Instead, you provide a small, consistent signal. Maybe it's just 5 minutes of silence over your morning coffee. Maybe it's committing to one single task block of 30 minutes a day. These actions seem insignificant, but they are actually votes for the person you are becoming. Every time you choose a glass of water over another hour of scrolling, you aren't just hydrating. You are telling your brain, I am the kind of person who takes care of my focus. Every time you finish a single task without checking your notifications, you are saying, I am someone who values deep work. Initially, you are just performing an action. But over time, through the magic of neuroplasticity, those small actions start to rewrite your self-image. This is where the struggle ends. When you reach the identity shift, you no longer have to try to be productive or force yourself to be calm. It simply becomes who you are. You stop saying, I'm trying to stop multitasking, and you start saying, I don't multitask. It's not how I work. This is also how motivation finally finds you. Most people wait to feel motivated before they act, but that's backwards. Motivation is a reward the brain gives you after it perceives progress. By starting with micro habits, things so small they are ridiculously easy to accomplish. You give your brain a steady stream of small wins. These wins trigger a healthy release of dopamine, which creates the desire to do it again tomorrow. Transformation isn't a mountain you climb in a day. It's a series of small steps that eventually change the landscape of your life. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to be drastic. You just have to be consistent. Your brain is always adapting. It never stops. The only question is, what kind of person are you teaching it to be? By choosing intentional, small behaviors, you are quietly building a mind that is clear, a body that is resilient, and a life that is no longer lived on autopilot, but with purpose.